All right. I don't know about you all, but we have started a fun habit of thanking Zoom. It's just like, thank you, Zoom, for starting the recording for us. So we're going to do a couple of things next. We're going to do some introductions. I'm going to pull up our presentation. This is, of course, our presenter services session that's all about on-site presenting. And we have a number of things that we, of course, do need to cover with you. So we're going to dive right in. And as we do so, please let us know if you have any questions. So let's go ahead and nevertheless kick things off. All right. So some Zoom housekeeping. This is going to be helpful for a few reasons, right? For those of you joining us, whether you're live or in the future, going over some standard Zoom housekeeping items is always helpful. This will give you a sense, particularly if you're one of those folks joining us for other conference spaces, insight into how we do things at the OLC. Of course, onsite will look different. So that is what we're here to talk about. But nevertheless, this session is virtual. So a few things that we want to make sure are on your radar before we kick things off. The chat is there. You can already see that it is a great space to get to know each other, say hello. If you have questions, we will be actively monitoring it today. It's myself, my colleagues, Katie and Angela Gibson as well. So let us know. If we miss a question, please feel free to re-articulate it. So drop it in there again. Sometimes that chat goes very quickly and we do our best to respond in there, but we might miss things. That's certainly not our intent to ignore you. We just genuinely might have missed it. So it's by no means a bad thing to ask your question again, or just let us know if we saw it. We are going to ask that you stay on mute for the length of the session. Otherwise, you can, of course, come off mute to ask questions. But this does help us increase the accessibility of the session and affords a better space for folks to engage. If you have a question, though, there are a few ways that you can let us know. You can let us know in the chat, and we'll be glad, as we said, we're going to be monitoring that. So you can just say, hey, can I come on mic? We'll absolutely provide some space for that. You can also raise your hand, and that can be found on the reactions button, which is on your Zoom meetings control bar. And there's a little raise hand button. If you do that, that just lets us know that you have a question. We'll go ahead and navigate that way. Quick tip and just something to let you all know in advance is that if your mute button accidentally starts to go off and you start making a lot of noise on your end, we will move to silence you via the mute. And that's certainly not to make it quiet for any reason other than sometimes we know that that button's accidentally hit, or you never know it. And you might not recognize it or might not be able to find that button quickly enough if you are not looking at your Zoom monitor. That's happened to me before, right? So we're going to be in there to support you in that way. But do let us know. So if you are unmuted and then suddenly muted, it might be because of that. So just heads up fully. There is one last thing that we do want to make sure you're all aware of is that we have enabled live closed captioning. So if this is a service that you are looking forward to, you should be able to already engage with that. If you're having any troubles, please let us know though. All right, we of course need to do some introductions. So I will do it this way. I'll introduce myself and just by way of reading the slide, introduce my two colleagues because you'll be hearing from each of them today as well. But my name is Maddie Sugar. I'm Director of Online Engagement with the OLC. I'm also joined today by Angela Gibson, who is our amazing Presenter Services Chair this year and works with the Texas A&M University System. We've also got as well Katie Five-Schuster. She is a Director of Conferences and Events within the Online Learning Consortium as well. And we are together your leads for today's session. As we said, this is all about covering the basics of on-site. We have a jam-packed session for you all. So if there's something that we didn't get to, please let us know. But otherwise, hopefully we'll answer the majority of your questions here today. So speaking of the things that we hope to cover, we're going to first and foremost review the session types. This might be a little bit redundant for those of you who are also presenting virtual, but there are some session types that are in both spaces. We want to make sure that those of you who are here have a good understanding, potentially because it might have been a bit since you submitted your proposal, of what session you submitted. So if you're thinking, oh, I have no idea what session I am, we can help you figure out how to find out. There is a really easy way to actually track that yourself and go in and research that. But in addition, there are some tips and tricks and things we want you to keep in mind as you plan for your specific session type. So we're going to do a little bit of review for those. We are also going to cover some key considerations for designing, preparing, you name it, for your sessions, actually delivering your actual session content once you're there. technology considerations, interactivity, engagement, ways to be creative. We'll cover some of those today as well. Humanizing your presentation is going to be key. So we'll talk about that, particularly on site, right? In the virtual context, that might be an example of, right, if my dogs bark, I'm going to own it and just say, well, my dogs are barking, folks, and pass it to Katie and Angela, because sometimes that does happen. So we're going to talk through some strategies for how to do that on site as well. And then just other logistical considerations and safety, given that we are excited to see you all, but of course that for some of you, this might have been the very first in-person or on-site event that you've been to since 2019. And that's something we absolutely want to address here today and talk about so that you all know what is planned. All right, so speaking of session types, on site, we do have the following. We've got our education sessions, we have our express workshops, we have our gamified workshops, we have our just workshops, if you will. I always want to think just workshops, and then our lightning talks. So we're going to go through each of these, give you a refresher as to what they are, as well as some key considerations. So education sessions, what are these? These are 30 to 35 minutes of a presentation, typically with 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. These do tend to be facilitated as a discussion group. So it's definitely something to keep in mind there. And you can run these in a number of ways. So one of the things that we have definitely been thinking about is things like polls, chats, Twitter, hashtags. If you were to imagine using the tables in the space for think, pair, share in small breakout groups, absolutely something that you want to think about for education sessions. These aren't meant to be sit and get where you talk at someone for 30 minutes, but definitely leveraging engagement tools like you see here, Q&A, guided practice, small discussion, audio, video, worksheets, you name it, as a means to bring folks together for the sake of engaging in your topic rather than just listening to your topic, right? You do have a little bit more length of time here for the education session. So certainly want to promote active engagement and active participation within these session types. A few other things that we certainly do want to point out is that for this particular session type as well, you have the option, and some of you might actually be engaging in a panel style discussion. So in this case, we might be looking at, for instance, 45 minutes. We still nevertheless want it to be interactive. And so that rather than a podcast where you might just listen to it, there are ways to actively engage a participant group within the space of a panel. So you can have them, for instance, submit questions. You can ask them to respond in the session itself. You can have them use the reactions and the emotions to say, all right, hey, that was an excellent point that our panelists just made. Have any of you had experience with that same issue, that same challenge? So nevertheless, really seeking ways to actively engage your audience. Because 45 minutes can be a lot to sit through, right? But sometimes we need that to actually have the discussions in the panels that we know we ultimately need to, right? The panels can be tricky to facilitate and tricky to manage. So we are going to recommend you, as a result of some of the logistics of panels, that those of you organizing panels really try to stick to 3 or 4 members. Beyond that, within the scope of 45 minutes, you actually can't ask too many questions to really think and be strategic about who you have responding to what questions, so you can actually maximize or optimize that time and the amplifying their voices. Make sure you're really thinking about providing a diverse viewpoint as well. So be strategic with your panel choices to the extent you can. I know in organizing panels that sometimes you have to go with who's available and who's willing, but nevertheless really be thinking about what kind of conversations are they bringing to the table, and how will they continue the conversation and further enhance that space. Typically, there is one moderator that is. This doesn't have to be the organizer, but there is strategy there. If you're looking for some tips and tricks, I highly recommend a facilitator document, because then the organizer and the moderator do not necessarily need to be the same person, and not everything needs to live in that organizer's head. So if you have a Kate Sanka's in the house. Sorry, I just saw that, got really excited. But if you are the organizer and are coming up with the key questions, that can actually be shared ahead of time with your panelists so they can prepare. Everyone's looking at the same document. And that's actually quite a strategic move. And then you can even indicate, hey, Katie, you're going to be answering question 1, then I'm going to move to Angela. Then Tracy, you're going to be answering question 2, then I'll move to Dorothy. And you can actually be strategic with already aligning that all within the same document. This might be old news to many of you, but if you are new to running panels, let us know. We have mentors available who can absolutely provide you some more strategic guidance as to how to do that effectively. All right, express workshops. So these are also 30 to 35 minutes of a presentation. Definitely more intentionality here in terms of being interactive. There nevertheless will be time for Q&A typically. And I say that typically with that pause point is that you need to make sure you reserve that time, right? Because otherwise you will not leave that time. It's not like we will be in the room facilitating that to ensure, I'm sorry, you are done, you're over your question period time. That will be something you absolutely want to make sure to retain and have a sense of ownership over and agency over. We know the audience loves Q&A, whether that be virtual or on site. And so in this instance, make sure that you're really thinking about the length of time you are presenting versus engaging in question and answer. You could also embed that throughout your session. So that's something I'm going to encourage you all to think about as well, is how to make use of the time that you have within that room. We say appropriate methods of engagement here, but really you'll see that these are really similar. These are going to be recommendations that we make around engagement holistically. So across the board, and you'll hear Angela talk a little bit about that in a bit. But workshops are great spaces for you to, for instance, use a particular hashtag. In this sense, you won't have necessarily breakout rooms physically, but you can use breakout tables or breakout stations. You can have them engage in collaborative notes. And we're going to recommend, or I'm going to recommend you really think about blended models in that sense, that there can be digital spaces that they're engaging in during that on-site session. So lots of ways to really leverage shared collaborative digital spaces, even though we're going to be nevertheless on site together. We are going to be talking a little bit about some of the accessibility related pieces related to audio, video, but there are going to be projector screens. There are going to be speakers within the spaces. So you can absolutely still play audio, video within these spaces. All right, gamified. So gamified, we might imagine, if you're not familiar with them, they are inspired by leveraging gameful tactics, actual games. And so these are meant to be experiential in that way. They can certainly be about the content, but we're going to absolutely make the recommendation that you lean into modeling the very things that you're talking about by enveloping and engaging folks right within the very world, if you will, of your gamified session. So we've had a number of folks that leveraging, for instance, Kahoot and the like in lieu of something like a poll. And while that is gameful in mind, right, that if you are talking about, for instance, role-playing games and using role-playing games, why not actually envelop the audience in a role-playing activity itself? Okay, so take up that opportunity to really show them through practice the very things you're talking about. Like our other sessions, so this feels redundant, but these are 30 to 35 minutes. We do have 10 to 15 minutes of questions. Again, think about how you want to leverage that throughout the length of time you have. And in this case, while you can certainly use all of these, you could have competitions, you can use games, you can use breakout rooms, you could actually have them run an escape room, like we'll have an escape room on site as well, but very leveraging, for those of you leading these, really lean into the very tactics that you're bringing to the table. And I'm going to personally encourage you to engage them in it because it should be fun. And that's one of the things that we're looking for the gamifieds is they're going to walk away with really cool content, but they're going to be able to have fun and experience that content along the way. All right, workshops. So this is where the time changes a little bit. The difference you'll notice between express workshops and just workshops, so our regular workshops, is that these are 90-minute blocks, so a much longer block of time. We do typically run them in 2 45-minute sessions with a very short break. That's a lot to sit through. And so this is the format that you are going to be engaging with for onsite if you're leading one of our workshops. And we do have several of you here who are doing that. These are meant to be interactive. They are meant to be experiential. So you want to be thinking about activities, really intentional, collaborative group work or solo work, reflection work, giving them time to not just sit with what you're presenting, but actually engaging in some sort of facilitated activity. So a quick example might be, for instance, that you could do short provocation talks and have a cadence throughout your session that's 10 minutes of you really presenting something and then 15 minutes of them working in affiliation with whatever that 10 minutes just covered. You could have them, the entire session, if you wanted to, could be primarily group work with a very short talk in the beginning. You get to think about how to best leverage those 90 minutes. but certainly it shouldn't be 90 minutes of sit and get. 90 minutes is just listening and engaging in content. That will not meet the goals of that workshop, and certainly will contradict what folks are expecting of a workshop. So if you're having a hard time with thinking about how to possibly pack everything into 90 minutes, I'm going to say that you might need to cut, right? That's a really good sign that there's too much to cover. So really be strategic with what exactly you are planning on covering during that 90 minutes so we can ensure some great interactivity and engagement. You'll see there's very similar engagement recommendations there as well. But do keep in mind that we're hoping for some actual active participation there in our workshops. Lightning talks. So this is definitely, it's a tricky one. It's tricky because it is very short. So very similarly, I think long sessions and short sessions are some of the harder ones to prepare for, because we tend to say, oh, we got 90 minutes. We can do so much. We could also get lost in time with 90 minutes. These 15-minute lightning talks are very similar to that extent. We either try to prepare way too much, or we didn't prepare enough because we thought, it's only 15 minutes, so I can't prepare enough. So this is going to be one of the presentations, not that we're not going to recommend this for any of the others, because preparation, practice, testing is going to be something you're going to hear from us today. But a 15-minute lightning talk, it is quite challenging. We recognize that. It's a really great design challenge to try to think about how you prepare for just 15 minutes. And this would include questions and the like. So things to think about, you could do, for instance, 1 to 2 minutes of introductions, and then 7 to 8 minutes for a presentation with 5 minutes of questions. And so if that's if you like that recommended cadence, please feel free to use that. We see that lightning talks that take this format are quite successful. You notice 7 to 8 minutes is a very short time. This functionally means the content time that you have to share is only 7 to 8 minutes. It's not actually the 15 minutes. So hopefully, if nothing else, this recommended format helps to get you all thinking about, that's including questions, that's including introductions. It's including getting the room started and all the other things we have to do within the space of a lightning talk. And in this case, right, also be thinking about folks who might be entering your room 2 minutes late, right? How do you plan for that? How are you mentally preparing for that? Recognizing that you only do have that 15-minute time. These are going to be scheduled 2 sessions per 45-minute block. And so the first one here will be a 15-minute lightning talk. Then we're going to have a 15-minute transition time. So you can consider that a break. And then that will follow with the second lightning talk. So they will be in the same room that we will have that time for breaks as well. We are going to ask that you do not run over time. So that is something that we're going to make sure that we are honoring. So the folks that are presenting before or after you have time to prepare in that space. But nevertheless, you can still hang around. And so that's something, if you're, for instance, the first talk, could plan on, or say, hey, meet me in the hall if you want to chat afterwards, we can grab coffee, right? Those things you can leverage because you'll be on site with folks. But we are going to nevertheless keep you to that 15 minutes. So that's part of the design challenge here. Now, engagement methods, you'll see that we recommend fewer here because you do have less time. There's the chat, there's going to be Twitter hashtags, follow-up opportunities, like I said. So really be thinking about, because you functionally really only have 7 to 10, depending on how much time you leave for questions, you don't have a lot of time for content delivery. So we're going to be really strategically thinking about, what do I have folks do in that 15 minutes? And again, we have some fantastic mentors that could help you think about that very question. All right, so do let us know. I'm going to do a quick pause point. Katie, Angela, any questions in the chat so far that I've missed? All set? I see some thumbs up. Thank you, Angela. Feel free to interrupt me or let me know in the chat if we need to stop. Effective presentation. So design and delivery, we're going to go through a few things here. But we're going to ask you to really think about design here, and for a few reasons, right? When we really intentionally consider design, where it leads to more effective learning, it leads to deeper engagement, does lead to higher retention of information. And so we might not really think about that, but functionally design actually does quite a lot for us. So we've given you just some basic tips. Again, this is not an exhaustive by any means presentation, and please feel free to reach out again to our mentors or to presenter services if you want additional support. But at least in terms of slide design, we're going to talk about at least these 3 recommendations. So less is more. If we had a lot of content on a slide, that's a lot to read, that's a lot to engage in. And oftentimes that tends to be utilized more so for a resource on the back end than an actual presentation engagement. but as many of us in this room can likely attest, right? When I see something on a slide, I want to read it. I want to engage in it. If I see too much and they're telling me not to look at it, well, what's the purpose of the slide then, that purpose, right? In that context. So we're going to be asking you to really think about trying to keep your slide to what you genuinely want folks to engage in during your session. That doesn't mean you can't supply them with all of the additional resources. And we're going to recommend that you do, but just be really strategic with what is on that slide so that they can actually engage in it, or not use slides entirely, right? Seek alternative methods of what you actually present, what you project, and the like. Consider font pairings. Do consider accessibility in this instance as well. Not every font is accessible. 30-point font is, at least in this context, given the projector screens you're going to be in and the size of the rooms, we're going to recommend for your sessions. And we even modeled that here in this presentation for you. So it might look big on your screen, but imagine being in a big conference room, right? Where if you're sitting in the back, it might be a little bit smaller. So 30-point font is certainly going to be our recommendation. In addition to that, we're going to talk a little bit about graphics. So you can use graphics as opposed to words in some cases. You definitely want to think about alt tags and alternative text and image descriptions, particularly for those folks that require those for engagement. So this is a major point for accessibility. That's part of the reason we ask for your session content ahead of time, because that does need to be downloaded in order to engage with. So certainly something to be considering there. Good practice would be to describe what's on the screen. So for instance, this graphic is a graphic of multicolored puzzle pieces, all laid on top of each other in a pile. Without that kind of move, for instance, there are going to be folks that might not be able to engage in that graphic in the same way. So describing what's on the screen is a really good practice for accessibility. In addition to that, graphics can be helpful, though, for helping to share a method or continue a narrative in your presentation. So not everything has to be text. It can be unique but relevant, follow a theme. So you can really lean on graphics as well as part of your presentation. So not everything is text-based like we do here. All right, session preparation. These might be really basic, but we feel like where it's our imperative to nevertheless cover them. You will definitely want to be thinking about your content, be thinking about how you genuinely engage attendees. I will say, if you do not think about that ahead of time, you're going to be missing out on some really cool opportunities to even think about how you share your content, in what ways or what formats you share your content, the modalities, the spaces that you make possible for folks to get to know each other and engage with each other on site. And so engagement does require planning. And it will also put you in a space where you get to do cool new things that maybe you hadn't thought about if you just rely on some of the more classic things that folks tend to do. Timing. So timing is something that we recommend you do and that you practice. I have, for instance, my clock right next to me. Oh, well, that was my login screen, but my clock right next to me so I can follow along with the time and make sure we're on track here. We do genuinely recommend you practice. For some folks, that might be hopping onto a recording and going into a room and then seeing where was long, where was short, just to get used to as well, talking in front of someone. So it might be you talking to yourself, but nevertheless, maybe that's the practice you need. You can also send that to your colleagues and say, hey, do you mind checking this out? Does this make sense? Right. So you have that as an artifact or an asset to use for practice. Coming up with a backup plan as well. So an alternative plan, just in case things go awry. So what happens, for instance, if you have one person in your room? What happens if you have 200? So how are we planning for even different audience sizes? For, what if I don't get questions? Have I really thought about other ways that folks can engage even asynchronously after the fact if they don't have questions for me right then and there? So definitely planning to be agile here in this space. Beginning with alignment is going to be key. So you did submit a proposal that does have a title, that does have an abstract. And as we know that, well, there's time and there certainly was a window to submit those revisions. Nevertheless, right, come conference, that program it's done, right? And folks are going to that conference expecting a certain session, expecting certain things out of that. That doesn't mean that, of course, you can't always make some changes on, if something happens and you're like, you know what, this is terrible, I need to rethink this. But absolutely make sure you are vocalizing that at the very start of your session if anything did change, and any online content that you prepared, that you're changing that to the extent that you can, given the time that you have, so that folks know what they're expecting and they know what to look out for. And then if you do make changes, right, don't be shocked if folks leave, right, because they were coming for one thing and you made some additional changes. So just be thinking about these things so that you're preparing for them as well. I don't think we have many folks that do leave in those scenarios, but you never know. And I certainly want you to be thinking about those. So planning for your presentation, this is like everything else. We do recommend you test, that you record, that you review, that you note your stage presence. So, do you smile? Do you not? What kind of, if you will, vibe do you want to give off? What do you want to look like? Are you welcoming? Are you inclusive? Practicing with a friend, a colleague, a buddy in this instance, as we said on the screen, can be helpful. And sometimes that's a really great conversation as well. It leads to areas where you can seek additional clarity, and check out the room. So once you do get to the venue, we highly recommend you go in and look at the room, get a sense for the space. And you'll be able to have all that information, of course, on the conference program that'll be available to you. So go in there and give the room a look. Also, these venues can be large, right? So I would make the personal recommendation to go there just so you know, if nothing else, how long it takes to get there, and that you know how to get there. Because, if you're a person that tends to get lost, I don't want you to get lost, right? So practice it, get there, navigate to the space in the way that you need to, so that you know your directionality and how to go. And there are folks along the way, field guides, for instance, that can help you locate rooms if you are indeed lost. So that's not entirely on you. All right, and then there is, just for sake of modeling that, there's a graphic on the screen here that's of a group of colleagues or potentially students at an office working at some laptops at a table. All right. So I know this is fast, so do let us know if you have any questions, or raise your hand if you'd like us to stop. We're going to try to get through a lot here for you today. For your presentation, I know we said this already, but we really are hoping that you're engaging folks in a conversation, that you're thinking about how to strategically utilize the space given to you, and the tables, even the chairs, the screens, the audio. We're hoping to optimize learning in this space, and I'll take the time here to really encourage you all to think about, and if this is a shift, then lean into it, but that you are presenters, yes, but you are also afforded a space to lead professional development. So in this sense, you are also educators. So think about your audience as students, your audience as learners. And so just like we would prepare for a class or a learning space, that we have this opportunity, and leaning into that, it's not just about throwing content into folks, it's engaging them in that content and hopefully helping to map to goals and outcomes that they bring to that space, and that you as well bring to that space. So really lean into that. It's going to be a cool opportunity for you to serve as educator in this role as well. Seek and always strive for accessibility. We know that this is, you might be new in this journey. We have resources that are here to support you. There are several organizations as well that are leading in this area. And so if you seek help and you want to know, you're saying, I have no idea what that means, absolutely reach out to us. We'd love to get you connected with resources and people who can guide you on that way. And if you think, I think I've got a fairly good idea, nevertheless, still going to encourage you to check out those resources, because this is an ongoing process, and new information and new strategies always come out with respect to accessibility. So always seek accessibility and strive for that there. We'll just have this last one here about being passionate, being compassionate, I would add. Folks are coming to enjoy your session, right? So hopefully have a little fun as well, right? And we know it's you submitted it for a reason. So bring that to the space, bring yourself to the space, and it will come through. All right. So panel discussions, we just have some additional things to draw to your attention. Keep things flowing, right? So it's very easy to get off time for panels. So do make sure you're tending to that. To the extent that you can stay on topic, right, that to the topic of what folks are talking about, you can always say, that's a great question. I'm going to write that down and see if my panelists are able to answer that outside the space of this session. But of course, just like any other session, panels, folks are coming to that for a certain conversation. So we want to think about that. We did say to involve attendees and close with key reflections. This would be a great recommended practice of how to synthesize what happened in a panel. And again, for sake of modeling, because we did this intentionally as well, on the screen here, you do see an image of a person in a suit, if you will, as well, holding a pen and what looks like an iPad pointing to what is a blank room. All right, so a couple other things that we wanted to get through here. Be mindful of time, connect ideas, share stories, that these are additional things that you can do in panels. let's say that one of your panelists says one thing and another says another. You can absolutely connect those and say, that was a great point. That reminds me of something, Katie said a few minutes ago. And you can do that work either whether it's yourself as an organizer or additional facilitators in that space. All right, a few more things. You are going to be in these physical spaces, so definitely figure out where you're comfortable to present from and what your needs are in that sense. To the extent that you can, be planning for and thinking about what disruptions might look like. It might be, for instance, disrupting to you if someone walks into the room late. And while we cannot prevent that, certainly something that you can plan for by anticipating that it's possible, that it might happen. And so what's your plan for what that is? Are you going to acknowledge them? Are you not? Are you just going to smile and have them come in? Be thinking about that. You can do things yourself as well, silencing your cell phone or watches that you might have. If there is a door, right, and you can closing that door, muting notifications related to computer sound. So if you have your laptop up, actually muting that so that those don't come up on the loudspeakers, because you will have louder speakers. So that can be quite disrupting there. And otherwise, if something happens, right, just make note of it, because we are all human, of course, and things do happen. And so acknowledging that is absolutely fine. All right, with that, I'm going to pass things off to the one and only Angela Gibson to talk through some engagement strategies.
Thank you so very much, Maddie. And I just want to say that we're all excited about your escape room session that you'll be doing on site. You've had some fans in the chat already, so it's we'll all coming to your escape room session. All right, next slide, please. Engagement strategies for those who are new to on-site presentations, new to OLC presentations, new to conference presentations. Please, ask lots of questions. And those of you who have been on-site with us before or presented on-site, we look forward to you offering here in the chat any additional engagement strategies that you'd like to share. But think about it this way. Would you want to be at your own presentation? So I really think that one of the things as you're preparing for planning out, aligning with your abstract, and also making your edits as you practice and test again, is what is engaging about your session. It is so easy to want to stand up for several minutes and just talk, because you have so much to share and so much to think about. So I want you to think about what you would do to engage your participant audience. And it really does depend on your type of session. Again, going back to what Maddie said about the types of session, that's really important to think about that type of session. And in addition to this webinar, we have the types of sessions on the conference site. So if you wanted to refresh yourself and in addition to this session, you can, or you can talk to us a little bit more about the session type and get a feel for it. Also, the rooms, as I see people talking about in the chat, might also determine how you might utilize the space, as Maddie said before, and you might want to think about how that interactivity is going to happen. Also, as this is a BYOD, a bring your own device conference, including your own, you can have collaborative sessions. So even if you have a very large session with lots of participants, or maybe you didn't even expect lots of participants and they're all standing, ringing the wall and you're so excited because it's standing room only, you can have people participate on devices. So think about that, that you might have a couple different ways planning, that you might have one way if you have fewer participants, you might have another type of engagement if you have a lot more participants, or if they're in a large setting, and also have a backup. Please definitely have a backup. Nothing's worse than going, oh, well, I only planned for 15 participants, so I guess we'll have to just, I don't know, do something different. And I'm not sure if I'm ready for that kind of session coming back on site. I definitely want there to be, okay, so I'm really excited. There are a lot more people here than we expected, but hey, this is what we're gonna do. And it is gonna be fun. So definitely always have a backup. Please go to the next slide. For some sessions, and if you don't know who you are and you're not sure, definitely check your conference confirmation. But There are a few sessions that will be streamed, so definitely plan for engagement and delivery specific with your virtual audience as well as your on-site. Also similar thing. So for those few streamed sessions that we have, if let's say 10 minutes into the presentation, people are breaking into pairs or groups, and I've had this before where I've been in a virtual session and the presenters are like, okay, well, so we broke into groups or we broke into pairs, and the virtual people are like, what would you like us to do? And they're like, I don't know. I didn't plan for you all to be part of it. And that was kind of depressing, and we just took over our own conversation. But it was great because, you know, we wanted to be engaged and we wanted to be involved. So think about what are you going to do to have that blended opportunity to be with your virtual attendees? How do you have them report back? But again, as Katie said, there's only a small number of them, so we only are going to use one slide to talk about it. Next slide, please. Now we're going to talk a little bit about interactivity for those of you, again, who have experience with on-site interactivity, which is going to be different, of course, than this virtual component, which, you know, we can be presenting and watching the chat at the same time and having that back and forth conversation. Think about how you're going to involve the audience. And interactivity is really a big part of the OLC conferences, and virtual and on-site, but specifically on-site. And we want this to be, you know, as we said, less talk at and more talk with, and have that interaction and conversation. So think about how you're going to engage the attendees. They came to hear about your project, your idea, your innovation, your challenge, your effective practice. So think about some specific questions that they might be asking you, or perhaps ask them for their insights to share. Also think about the level of interactivity that you are looking for with your audience. Again, you might want to utilize technology. You might want to use in-person type things. So you might think about polling. You might think about show of hands. You might think about colored index cards, all kinds of different things for that interactivity. But also engage your audience by asking them questions. Don't wait for them to ask you questions. Don't wait for does anyone have any questions? That definitely kind of shuts things down. So we want to be able to ask questions of our audience. They have a lot to share. It could be through polling. It could be through asking them to contribute to a collaborative document that you might have on the screen, or that everyone's using as a collective document. This also gives you an opportunity to generate conversations and ideas. Also keeps them interested. If you're in a session for 45 minutes and don't move at all, except to blink, you might, end up finding the coffee afterwards. But definitely keep individuals interested and ask them if they have particularly any challenges, or they've experienced some challenges that you're setting forward and what they did. So figure out, that type of interactivity, and also have a way to follow up. So having those collaborative documents, live documents that are linked. It could be a collaborative note-taking document during the session. It could be an explore more type document that is added to by participants in your session based on your conversations and questions that happen, and have that opportunity, as Maddie said, to follow up afterwards. It could be virtually, it could be hanging out at the coffee networking session, whatever it is, but definitely engage your audiences. Next slide, please. So some things about presenting in person. If it's been a while, I know I kind of I'm super excited, but I kind of am slightly nervous because I need to shake off the cobwebs, and not just be sitting in my favorite cushy chair here. And I know I'm going to be like screaming across the hall at people. Yeah, I do that. Sorry. People will be like, oh my God, I see you. And everyone's like, great. No, it's not going to happen. But we have to think about that, being in that on-site conference space, definitely being considerate of the fact that there's going to be individuals there who are coming to on-site conferences from being virtual for such a long time, or never being at an on-site conference. So be you, be okay. Be authentic. I really will try not to yell at you across the hall. I typically yell at people down the escalator. If things don't go as planned, it's okay. Definitely bring in the audience. The audience is your friend. The audience will rally behind you, and also be considerate. So definitely thinking about things. It's okay if not everything goes great. There was a session I did with a wonderful co-presenter, and for some reason, my system, which I had just presented, 15 minutes before I got into the next room, for some reason the presentation slides would not open right away, even though we had checked it out the night before and we had tried the session. And so what we did is we just were authentic and human, and we said, listen, I don't know why these slides are taking a little bit of time, and the Wi-Fi something was going on, and I had my backup on my desktop, I had my backup on my flash drive, I had my backup on my Google Drive, and it was all taking too long to open. So what we did is, while it was trying to figure itself out, we just took the latter part of our presentation, which was sort of a conversation, and we put it at the beginning, and everyone understood. And when it came on screen, everyone cheered, and we just picked up where we were. And it's, the audience will understand, just be real with them. And nothing's worse than, having that sort of technology fail, even though you've tested out and tried and had 3,000 backups. So just definitely take a breath, be okay, have a backup. Your audience will be with you. Next slide, please. Again, going back, you keep hearing us say the same things, and it's so important. So think about how you want to be interactive and have engagement. So I'd love for a few of you, or as many of you as you like, to put in the chat now some of your on-site engagement techniques. What have you used? I mentioned polling. What kind of polling have you used? I mentioned a collaborative live document note. Have you done that? Is it useful? What about props? Some people like to bring things that are kind of funny, or will, like, graphics on a screen will remind individuals what it's all about. Sue said hand raising. Emily says Mentimeter and Kahoot. Suzanne Padlet. Maddie likes the sticky notes. I love sticky notes for brain sessions. Augusto says polling and show of hands. Sean likes Padlet or doing a Kahoot game. Very good. Excellent. These are all great ideas. Yes. And definitely think about what you want to bring. One of my co-presenters, she loves bringing candy. I know that OLC is famous for the networking breaks. And believe me, I'm always like, I wonder what this one is going to be, because, last one was the fondue. And so what's this? Oh, look, it's root beer floats. That's pretty cool. But my co-presenter loves to bring candy, and she likes to put candy on all the tables, and it's just a little touch, and that's important to her. And she likes to have, exactly, Ken, you can use it as a reward for people who get involved, or you can just have it on the table. There will be people who will be like, can I take some extra for the next session? And yeah, but just the fact she loves having those extra touches. You can also include things on the table that might be take back with them. Yes, it is a BYOD, bring your own device type conference, but something tangible might be something that people remember and take home with them. So Dorothy, stickers, absolutely. Fake microphones, giveaways, fun hats, clothing. Matthew says this is actually a topic he's presenting on. Or so Matthew, feel free to do a shout out in the chat and put your session title, because maybe we all want to go to that session. That sounds kind of exciting. Again, think about how you present. Not all of us are going to be super animated. So think about, and that's why recording and testing and practicing with a buddy is really helpful, because it gives you an idea of how you might present in that space. I know I like to walk around my space, and being virtual, I've had to learn how to be animated in my chair when I'm presenting at conferences. However, think about what it might be when you test. Are you projecting? Are you offering eye contact? Are you, scanning the room? Are you utilizing, the space around you? So definitely think about this. Next slide, please. So just, again, a few ideas for humanizing and engaging in that interactivity. So many of you have included these in the chat, so thank you very much. Definitely some great ideas in addition to what's on this slide. Sean also said he once contacted vendors and raffled off gift certificates and swag. We're all going to Sean's session. And Matthew put a shout out for his session. Oh, very nice. Zippers for learning using video conferencing to engage students in virtual classes. Love it. Thank you for that. Shameless plug. Thank you for offering to do that. Next slide, please. So another thing in engagement and interactivity also means access. And that's why we always have to have the ability to check for accessibility of our actual presentations, especially on the screen, like Maddie and I think Katie was mentioning in the chat as well. On the screen, looks a lot different in the presentation site than it does on our computer. And that's why I like to go stock out my room the night before or as soon as I get to the conference and test it on the screen in case I need to make some changes at the last minute, especially for accessibility purposes. If you're not familiar with accessibility purposes, again, we have some coaching through our mentor presenter services that we can help you with contrast, with font size, with accessibility, with not crowding too much font with your images and these sort of things. Also, if you have any audio or video with audio material, you'll definitely want to make sure that has that accessibility for closed caption. But also, I want to have a moment to think about, will the session itself be accessible? We had a wonderful individual at the last time I was on site with OLC who was sight impaired, and we had initially our initial plan, not our backup plan, but our initial plan was that we were going to use a Google Doc for collaborative notes. And because when she came in the room and identified that she needed support for the session, we had a backup plan and we were able to then accommodate for that. So I want to definitely have you all think about what you might do as your plan for creating accessibility for all conference attendees and your participants, definitely. Next slide, please. And speaking of accessibility, we want to make sure that your conference documents that you upload by September 10th are all accessible. As we've been talking about in the session today, as well as in the chat, if it's a work in progress or something that you're going to have live as a collaborative document of some type during the session, you may want, you definitely want to make sure that you note that, and that it'll be, that it'll be updated, that it's, a live link, but also making sure that your materials are accessible, not just as in accessibility, but also, can I actually access them? Nothing's worse than going into a thing and it says, you need permission to open this file. Oh my gosh. So definitely this is why testing out with your buddy, send them all your materials first and ask them, can they see it? Can they open them? Are they able to get in? Can they do what it is that you want your participants to do? So definitely think about this, the access as well as accessibility, and how you plan to share out materials, even if it's an Explore More or swag bag type resource document or set of documents, or creating a Google site or something like that. Next slide, please. So definitely make sure that, and Nicole just prefaced that in the chat. Thank you, Nicole. Is your presentation engaging? Definitely, as we've mentioned, making sure that your font size and your font type is accessible, making sure that you test it out. Is it too cluttered? Is it clear? Is it too wordy? Is it not wordy enough? Will it get your points across? Even if you have supplemental material, the presentation is on the screen. Will it do what you want it to do? So please go to the next slide. And then also part of engagement is evaluation. I always tell the participants that I love to know what worked well and what didn't work well and what they'd love to see different next time. And I actually use those evaluations to help with the future presentations that I might submit as proposals. So definitely encourage your participants not only to fill out the evaluations, but also remind them that they can win prizes, because we all love to win those OLC prizes. And that's definitely part of your session. You can include this slide. The slide will be available, and I have it right here. Here is the information for including your evaluation slide. You can have it on your screen as well as your uploaded presenter materials. And at this time, speaking of technology and presenter considerations, I'd like to turn this over to the amazing, wonderful Katie Schuster.
Thank you so much, Angela. I feel like most of the topics that I'm going to cover really quickly, we've already touched on through questions in the chat, but we're going to go over them again. As people were asking what size slide format is preferable for onsite, all of the rooms are set up, will be set up with screens that can accommodate 16:9 slide ratio. If you still like to do that old 4:3 ratio, that can be accommodated. You'll just miss out on a lot of screen real estate. So, and if you don't know how to change your slide ratio, I think it's an easy thing to Google. And I think Maddie had put some links in the document. I'm hoping these are the right ones. I'm going to throw them into the chat. On how to change the ratio of your slides so that it's a 16:9 slide format. As Angela mentioned, please do plan to start and especially end your session with that slide evaluation or that evaluation slide, and encourage attendees to submit the evaluations. There are prizes for those that submit. There's a prize for one presentation that gets, one of the highest numbers of session evals submitted, but also, and most importantly, we actually use these evaluations to determine who will be the recipients of the Best in Track awards. So you want to encourage people to submit those evaluations so that you'll be in consideration for the Best in Track award. I know we've talked about this on many occasions throughout today as well, but please make sure you have a backup of your presentation somewhere in the cloud, somewhere on a flash drive, something. We have had times when people's computers have just died in the middle of the conference day and they're just blue screen of death. We don't want that to happen to you. So we want you to have a backup of your presentation and any of the components of your presentation so that that doesn't happen. And if it does, you're prepared. I did see a question from Corinne about the on-site projectors. We are using HDMI connectors. So if you need a dongle to connect your computer to an HDMI cable, please bring that. We'll have a few on-site that you can borrow, but it is first come, first serve to borrow those. Prepare your technology. Practice with your audio, with your video, with your live polling, with any other of your media that you're planning on using. We encourage you to prepare and practice with that. As Angela mentioned, update your system before you leave for the conference. Make sure that if you're due for an update, that you do that not on site so that it doesn't impact your ability to use your laptop to present. That's a great tip. All right, so yeah, testing, we can't emphasize testing and having backups enough. All right, next slide, Maddie, thank you. All right, if you have co-presenters, things that you want to consider and that you want to test and prepare for are, what does your timing look like? How will you hand off between presenters? Similar to how Maddie and Angela and I are doing things today, we have determined ahead of time who's going to take care of which slides, how we're going to hand off, what that timing looks like. So we recommend that you work on a plan for that with your co-presenters ahead of time as well. How will you manage participant interactions? Will there be someone on your presenter team that's designated to answer questions? But think about and plan ahead of time how you want to manage that. Who's going to manage the technology? If there are 3 of you presenting, whose laptop will you use? Who will run the slideshow? So those are the kinds of things you want to consider ahead of time and make a plan for. Any of those what ifs. All right, next slide. All right, the other thing is we encourage you to promote your session. We've prepared a presenter promotion kit page for you, and let me just grab the link for that. And I'll throw that in the chat as well. And that gives you a couple sample tweets, social media posts, things like that you can customize that will help you promote your session. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, and this is a good example of what we were talking about before, where the slide is too text heavy. I did leave it in here as an example the way it is, just to prove that point, but it also does convey important information about uploading your presentation. So most of you have received, you all should have received this information already, but you want to log into your OLC user account, go to your conference profile, and then click on My Sessions in the upper right. Use that edit link to upload those files. The due date is September 10th, and I'm actually going to throw a link to a YouTube video that we made that walks you through this process of uploading your presentation file as well. So you just want to make sure after you've uploaded your file that you scroll down and select the Save button. There's a space for uploading a file. There's also a space for adding a presentation link. So if you are using Google Slides, for example, and I think this is one of my tips that can help you, especially with the due date being September 10th and the presentation not happening until the first week in October, use a Google Slides or something that is stored in the cloud so that you can provide a static link for your presentation upload, but you can keep working on your presentation file. You can continue to make changes in that file, but that link you added to the conference management system for your presentation stays the same. Okay, next. Okay, so we also have a couple of slides to share with you about logistics and safety for on-site. I think someone already asked, but there is a wireless internet in the conference space. And so you'll be able to use that. We don't provide, I don't know that all the rooms have a hardwire connection to the podium, because we do provide that wireless internet across the conference space. But just a reminder, that is something that we contract through the hotel for. So while we contract for enough bandwidth, sometimes there are issues that are beyond our control. So again, that's why we recommend having a backup of your files. Don't plan on presenting from the file that you uploaded to the conference management system. That might create too much internet traffic, but have your file on your local machine and have a backup as well. Somebody asked earlier about the hallway monitors for AV and tech issues. So there will be hallway monitors that we have contracted through the local tourist organization. There will be, I think, 1 or 2 per hallway. Basically, depends on how many rooms are in the hallway, but they'll be there, and you can always reach out to one of them, poke your head out into the hallway to say, hey, I need some help in here. I have a tech issue. Can you call somebody to come and help me in this room, please? And so they'll do that. We also will have our on-site tech team roaming the hallways, and you can also always grab one of them. That's faster than grabbing a hallway monitor, but the hallway monitors basically have a direct line of communication to myself, and then I have a direct line of communication to our IT team, so either way, you'll get help. Just grab somebody in the hallway who is a hallway monitor or one of our AV or IT folks to help. Okay, next. All right, so some questions that we know are frequently asked. I just wanted to give you some answers to here. The deadline is September 10th for the session file uploads. And as I mentioned before, my recommendation is use one of those static links from Google or something like that. You could even actually use a Google link for a PowerPoint if you update your file by adding a new version. So that's my recommendation, knowing that there is a little less than a month between the due date and when you're actually presenting, and understanding that you'll probably still be working on your presentation throughout those couple of weeks. So how do you access your session content? So the access is going to actually be the same for all of the attendees, whether you're registered as a virtual attendee or an all access attendee. We're using one online conference venue, and the access will be the same for everyone. So you'll receive instructions on accessing that venue closer to the conference. We're still putting our finishing touches on the venue now, so it's not quite ready to be shared with you, but it will be soon. Are there any specific safety protocols that we should consider? Well, as with most things these days, we're still very much in flux. Things are constantly changing, and we are staying up to date with all of the changing guidelines. You know, just earlier, a couple of days ago, over the weekend, the conference hotel changed their policy so that everybody inside needs to be masked. So it's just, please be flexible, be agile, recognize that everything is still changing, but that we are doing our best. We're working with federal and local authorities and following CDC guidelines. And we have a website, our webpage, where we are updating as things change. So you can feel free to follow up with that webpage for the latest in the guidelines. Okay, next slide, please. When should you be in the room or presentation space? There are 15 minutes between concurrent sessions. So we recommend you enter your room about 10 minutes before your scheduled start time. That'll give about 5 minutes for the presenter and attendees in the session before you to exit the room. And then you'll have that 10 minutes to set yourself up and be prepared and make sure your technology is working. We already talked about the support staff in your presentation space, but again, hall monitors, AV and IT staff are roaming the breakout hallways. So if you need help, just flag somebody down and we'll get you help as quickly as possible. And I think we already touched on this because somebody asked about what the room setup would look like. The breakout rooms are all going to be set with a podium and a head table. Attendee seating will be at round tables with space for social distancing. All right, next slide, please. Okay, so here's another consideration. On-site Q&A, what will that look like? We are planning to eliminate mic passing so that we can increase safety. We don't want anybody to be breathing heavily or spitting into a mic and then passing it to somebody else. So we're going to eliminate that and moving to a tech-supported solution for questions and answers. So the tech-supported solution that we are recommending for you, and you can pick one or more of these options, but the lowest tech solution is to make sure that you repeat any question that's asked by the audience over your microphone so that everybody can hear the question. The next one we have is you can use Slido or some other tool. I know you can sign up for a free Slido account, the basic free account, and set up an event so that you can use Slido to take questions and answers through that technology. And another great option would be to set up a collaborative document, like a Google document or some other type of collaborative document where people can go in and type their questions. We recommend that you answer those. Maybe if you have a presentation teammate who can record the answers for accessibility purposes, but there are several options that we're providing to you so that you can best manage your question and answer time and also make sure that everybody stays safe. Okay, and with that, I am going to pass things back to our wonderful Angela to finish and close us out.
Thank you so much, Katie. Just as a reminder, all things presenter services is at the OLC Accelerate 2021 site for presenter services. You can access the recordings for this webinar and all the others that we are hosting this month too, and also next month because tomorrow is September. Also, there is information about session types. There is also wonderful on-demand resources for presenter formats. There's also information on the evaluation slide, and you can request mentoring services, whether you're a veteran or a newbie. We love to help out. So definitely let us know your questions, and I pass it over to the excellent Maddie.
All right. Importantly, we believe in you all. We're really excited. Congrats on your session being accepted. You got this, right? So, and we're here for support. So if, we can't stress it enough. It is absolutely no bother to reach out to us for support. It's what we're here for. So please feel free to utilize the resources we have. And otherwise, we're going to open the floor to any final questions any folks have. In doing so, I'm also going to just move to stop the recording just so we have that going. But otherwise, please feel free to utilize the room. We do have a little bit extra time.